Thank you for joining us today, guys. Today we're joined by Robert Glazer, and I'm excited for him to share a little bit about his experience and background as an entrepreneur and some of the nuggets he's got for us today. So without further ado, Robert, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. As you said, my name's Robert Glazer. Go by Bob and other various pseudonyms. I have founded a few businesses, the largest of which is Acceleration Partners, which I'm still involved with today, which is a global affiliate and partner marketing firm. We have about 350 people around the world and work with large brands on scaling their digital partnership programs. Also started getting into some writing and speaking the last few years. I've written 5 books, do some keynote speaking and talk about sort of our industry and a lot of the things. We really built our company around a very specific culture and some practices on how to sort of build by growing people. And so I talk and write about those things and share them with other businesses. So that's my night and weekend job.
Very nice. How did you get to that point? Were you always in kind of digital affiliate type marketing, and or it sounds like the writing piece is new? Kind of what took you to those places?
Yeah, I was always in consumer and customer acquisition, like and realized early on that like it's not who has the best product or service, it's who figures out how to get customers most cost effectively for most businesses when they're scaling up and they don't have a name, right? Someone will say, oh, so and so does that in this part of the country, no one's ever heard of them. Well, then they might not have any business. So when I tuned into customer acquisition and sort of growth, I fell on this affiliate and partnership channel. I just felt like it was really the best way to grow a business, and we leaned into that. And look, timing and luck are we did this for a long time, and then suddenly the industry got really interested in it, and the wind got behind the sails, and that's where it is today. 10 years ago, no one understood what the hell we were doing, and today the market's pretty popular. So it does take being lucky, and sometimes being resilient while the tide's going out, and then eventually it comes in.
Very nice. So the one question we like to start with everyone is, once you hit that point of profitability, right, didn't have to worry about expenses, you had extra cash coming in that wasn't allocated for the business directly. What was your strategic framework in terms of, where to place the capital and what was important for you?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I was totally ever at that point. While the P&L might have looked good, if you're growing a business, if you're self-funding and a services business at 30 or 40% a year, like again, the amount of businesses, the reverse, or not the reverse, that go under because their profitability is good, but their cash flow is not, right? It constantly required a lot of reinvestment. But I think that is the conundrum for many people in terms of, some people can just generate a cash cow and they know it has no enterprise value. So they just want to, milk the golden goose because you can't sell the goose. When you're trying to build something that you may sell the goose or have enterprise value, usually that you can get more by reinvesting in your business than you can, taking that money out and putting it somewhere else and getting, 10%. I mean, if you're growing a business 30 or 40% a year, your return on capital is a lot better than that. So, it's this balance between you wake up one day too, and then you have 98% of your net worth, in your business. So, I've seen it go both ways. I think, I try to focus on just diversification of assets, outside the business. Even, I've done some things in real estate investments, but they all have different theses. I think the history of investing in time shows you like there's always winners and losers and things cycle through. So I try to focus on different groups, different strategies, and have balanced that. But that is the conundrum for most people. And I think this is why it's, I think, really important to be clear, Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind, because if you're hoping to sell your business, then you're probably better off reinvesting in your business, but you better make sure it's sellable. I have a lot of friends who know they have non-sellable businesses. They're very dependent on them the way it is. So, to them, it's like, hey, can I get this to turn $1 million or $2 million a year in profit and do that for 7 or 8 years? And then that's how I get my nest egg.
So I guess what are some of the key questions that someone should ask themselves as they're going through to understand if the business is sellable versus non-sellable, right?
Yeah. Well, first is, would you want to sell the business? Because some people, their identity is very tied to the business. I would say a really good test on is your business sellable today is what happens if you go on a sabbatical for 2 months? Like, are there no sales? Are there no deposits? Is there no customer service? Like, that's not really a sellable business. So a sellable business is one where you could go away for 3 months and, the business runs. So, that's how you have to think about it, particularly people in the services world.
So for someone who doesn't pass that mustard test, right? But wants their business to be sellable, where do they start in your mind? What's the most important piece to be able to get from, non-sellable to sellable for someone who wants to sell?
I would start following one of the systems like Traction EOS or Gazelles, Vern Harnish Gazelles, in terms of building scalability processes. I think there's two things, right? Building a management team and building repeatable processes are probably the two paths to make a business, less about you. And also just make sure you're understanding what you want. Some people are very depressed when they sell their business. It's what they want to do. It's their life work otherwise. So figuring that out. But yeah, I mean, the less that things are relying on you, it's about documenting processes, creating systems, making it much less reliant on people. I think either of those systems are a great place to get started.
So as we flip over to the other side, for someone who's got a sellable business and we're
Yeah.
talking about reinvesting, how do you think about how much to reinvest into the company, right? Do you pour everything? Do you pour a portion? Kind of, what's the thought process there, or tips that you would give on that side?
Yeah, I think it comes to your risk reward spectrum. Sometimes doubling down means making less profit. Sometimes doubling down means unprofitable, right? Obviously, the more your business is growing, the more at risk it is. So it depends on the cushion that you have behind it. I always took out a pretty big home equity loan that I never used. You never know when you might have a bad few months or quarters, and you need to be able to fund that. So I think those things go hand in hand. What's your security blanket? Are we talking about going from a lot of profitability to a little less profitability? We're going from profitability to unprofitability because, those can, you run into something now like a recession or, inflation, you can get caught in those cycles. So I think it depends, the problem is the higher risk is higher reward, like anything in life. If your business has the potential to grow 50% a year, usually that 50%, again, you can be profitable, but it's hard to not chew up cash, right? You got to hire people, you got to pay ahead, you got to do stuff before you get paid. You sign bigger clients and they reliably pay every 90 days. So inevitably, almost like the more reward has the more risk. And so I always say like play these things out in both scenarios. Like how would you feel if it didn't double, and how would you feel if it halved, and which is the greater problem for you?
So throughout your career, right, you've gone through several different companies. How has that risk appetite changed for you, maybe in the first entity versus, some of your latest endeavors in, how you've approached it?
Yeah, it did change. So, when it got to the point where, one of my businesses was just a considerable portion of my wealth, and I realized, it was going to need a lot of cash, and the team was excited about growing it. That's when we decided to partner with, an investor or private equity, thinking like, look, at this point, I've gotten it to the point where, going for the home run or striking out is not interesting. Like, I'd rather hit doubles and triples, but the people on the team, want to go for home runs. So we found a partner to sort of help support that. So again, I think if everyone is clear about what they want and why they want it, then you can take strategies that help support that. So I think, that was a great option for us, was getting an investment partner who would fund that growth capital and could give the team the upside they were looking for without me having to decide to, reinvest all that. So that was a good decision. And then, I generally think, when you have nothing to lose, it's easier to double down. As you start to have that, look, a lot of financial advisors, might advise, particularly, maybe 6 months ago, but not now. Look, take a 30-year mortgage at 3%, don't pay it off. But I've talked to a lot of business owners who felt like, when they had their kids' college saved for, when they paid off their house, when they had the car, when they actually felt like risk couldn't bring down their family, then they felt more comfortable taking risk. Everyone knows that you should borrow, not pay off. You should probably, any financial would say, take a big mortgage at 2.5% and don't pay it down in advance, right? But that's the correct investment advice in a bubble. But for some people, actually, I think it's not. I know some people who have done that, or they've taken a little private equity and taken some money off the table and sort of put some money in their retirement, put some and you know, paid off those things, and then they felt like much more comfortable swinging for the fences, knowing that they weren't going to bring down their family with them. I think that's the, you know, that's the baseline. At what point does chasing upside really put, you know, your family and their financial health at risk?
Do you think that's purely a personality trait that you know, drives that decision, or does every entrepreneur kind of reach that point at a different maturation of their business?
I think it's personality. I think it's life stage. Obviously, as a single 20-year-old person, I think you're just more inclined to keep, you know, doubling down and swinging for the fences. You know, you start to have kids, they start to, you know, college, they start to have stuff you want, you know, house, like then the cost of, you know, when you're 20s, if you end up in your parents' basement, not a big deal. If you're married with kids and you end up in your parents' basement, like much bigger deal. So I do think there's some personality. I think there's very different risk reward spectrums out there. There's different types of business. I do think some of it's life stage. Conversely, I actually think people come back to the risk proposition, you know, at maybe 40 or 50, I've seen. So kids are in college, like, you know, maybe the home is paid for at that point, you know, and they have maybe this is the time to take a little more risk. But you see people, not even entrepreneurs. I mean, I see a lot of friends who just, you know, they get to that max earning potential of 40. They don't like their job, but they're really afraid, you know, it's taken a lot of years to get into that income stream, and they're afraid to walk away from it or try something different or have to rebuild that up. So that tends to be a period where people are a little more safety focused, I think.
So you'd mentioned you're pretty diversified in a lot of different assets. You mentioned real estate and some other components. Did you follow that same kind of model in terms of, you know, taking some risk off the table, starting to hedge, diversifying on the personal? Did you mirror that, or what were the choices for you in terms of when you started to put that in play?
We were able to sell one of our businesses, you know, last year, and yeah, I started to diversify a little bit. I've always been in personal real estate. I like renovating things, and we've been able to use that as an opportunity. I actually I like things where you try to create value. You try to take something, improve it, create value. But again, even across real estate, you know, I'm in some, you know, things that focus on apartment buildings versus ones that focus on malls versus ones that focus on, you know, on distribution centers, like just different asset classes that aren't likely to be in lockstep with each other. Look, I think what the market's proven us now, a lot of things that people didn't think in lockstep with each other, like crypto and gold and the stock market, kind of seem directly correlated. So yeah, I you know, it's a balance over time. But again, this is the trick. If you really have a business that's growing, it depends on whether you want to sell it. But, you know, to pull your money out of your business and hope to get a 7 or 8% return when you might be getting a 20 or 30% return on equity, illiquid return in your business each year, like that's a interesting equation for a lot of people to look at.
What's the most exciting thing that you're working on today that gets you excited when you get out of bed? That's like, hey, I get to go tackle this today.
Yeah, you know, I've done a lot of work in some of my books. I've talked about figuring out your personal core values as a leadership strategy, as a personal development strategy. I think as a post-COVID great resignation strategy. So I created a course during COVID because people were asking me about the work that we did with our team and how we train people on that. And I've actually been able to get out and speaking with some companies and talking to them through this. I just worked with a huge organization that had a total breakdown in sort of decorum that was really values driven. And it was just, they really had never, they had these kind of Dilbert values like trust, respect, whatever, and they just weren't relevant at all. And getting a very skeptical group of people to understand that actually having core values that determine how they wanted people to behave, that what that looked like, how that could really changed the organization. It's been really interesting to work on.
When did that kind of come into your journey? Was that there from the beginning, or was there
No, that came in
cathartic moment?
typically when everyone reads my bio and like books, and like all of that was all after that moment of 2013, an intensive 5-day leadership program I went to, really realizing that like as I had started to be a leader, I was pulling a bunch of best practices together, but they weren't necessarily authentically me. And if I could really understand my core values and communicate those, I could just lead differently. I could think about what should I double down on? What should I stop doing? So I started doing a lot new things and I stopped doing a lot of things. I think a lot of us know our core values, that we know them by feel. We know them when they're violated, but we can't articulate them. And to me, that's the ultimate decision-making guide. Like if we were to say, like, look, like, here's a whole bunch of decisions and you're clear on your values, like you will make great decisions. If you can't articulate them, it's kind of like driving through the tunnel in the car with the lights off. Like you're going to hit the wall, you're going to get out of the tunnel. Car's just going to look pretty beat up. Because those, to me, the values are your guardrails, like things that you should drive towards, or people and situations and companies that you should stay away from.
Can you give an example of one of those values or best practices that you had taken for someone else that just didn't resonate with where your values that you moved away from?
Yeah, I can give you an example of why it matters, like in leadership. So we've had a couple people who in our leadership development program at our company have identified, core values that they kind of knew by feel. But for example, so trust, like trust as a core value. Normally a core value tends to come from a very formative childhood experience. In my point, most people are going for something they loved or dramatically against something that was traumatic in some way. And in most cases, trust people, it's a violation of trust earlier in their life that makes trust really important to them. Now, you can imagine a manager who has trust as a core value is really important to them. They might have never articulated this before, but someone on their team who's 5 minutes late to a meeting, who misses an assignment, who can't kind of be found, a few afternoons, like remote working, that triggers very primal feelings of distrust in a person for whom that's a really deep thing. And they basically, and you can ask them this and they don't want to answer it, but they basically have put these employees in a penalty box and they're not getting out. Well, it'd be really interesting if you could go back as a leader and, to my team and say, hey, look, everyone, trust is really important to me. Like, I trust you, I got your back, but things like telling me you're going to do it when you're going to do it, not showing up for the meeting, not be able to find you, like those for me are things that make it harder for me to trust you and just totally change the working relationship with their team. To me, it's like the ultimate personality test if you've taken all of these things. Like, so a lot of our leaders have gotten clarity on some of these things. They're like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize how much this has been affecting a lot of things for me. And then they've gone and communicated that to their team and kind of let them know how to manage up to them.
So it sounds like that core value and getting to clarity and being able to communicate that to others so that they know how to engage is where that true unlock is.
One of my dominant core values is find a better way and share it. That is why I write these books, as I do these things. You do not want to come work on my team if you're a let's do it how we've always done it person. I will exhaust you, drive you crazy. Like I'm just really honest with people. Like that's not my game. Like if you want stability and process, or maybe you're at a point in your career where you just want to do the same thing and you want to punch it in and punch it out, like our culture, being on my team, not, if you're bored in your current job, you'd probably love coming and working on my team. Like, so, I hired someone away 2 years ago and he was super bored and very intellectually curious. And I was like, you will never be bored a day in your life here. And he jokes around all the time that he has never been bored. Now, someone else might be like, I don't want to work for that guy. It's exhausting. Right. So that's, to me, that's part of the sort of self-identification. It's a little bit to me like colleges and universities, right? It's not that they're good or bad. They all have fundamentally different value propositions: religious, non-religious, city, big, small, rural, liberal arts, business. Like the goal is to find the one that has, what you're looking for, the things that they offer. Someone would be really unhappy if they thought they were applied to a large institution in a city, and then found out they were going to a small liberal arts school in the country. Like, it's just not, that's what happens with a lot of companies and leaders when they recite these bullshit values and stuff that don't actually reflect what it's like, what their organization values. I mean, Enron's values were like integrity, honesty, and respect. How you got promoted at Enron was you cheated, lied, and stabbed people in the back. Like, they would have been better off saying, like, this is actually what we value at Enron.
How have you over your career, right? So knowing that that's your personality type, but knowing that at a certain point the business reaches a maturation point where you just need someone who's very process oriented and like does the same thing, can do it repetitively to drive it forward. How have you balanced that and kind of recognize that in your team?
I fired myself as CEO last year. So I promoted my president to CEO. And I said, the business is at the organization where I'm the R&D department. It's smaller. Like, I'm going to go work on this stuff and work on, because if I try to mess with everyone's stuff day to day, I'm going to drive them nuts. Like, yes, we have 350 people now. It's a global business. Like, we need to run it, maintain it, do the daily calls, do the repetitive stuff that does not give me energy. So I gave myself permission to carve out a different role and let the better person for the job take on that role.
Had you done that before through your other companies, or was that kind of the first big, like, hey,
this is the company I've operated. The other companies, some of them I helped start and then step out of. So someone else was in that role. And I think going forward, I would know that as a general rule. Like, I'm kind of the executive producer, right? I can get the idea, get the money, get the team, get the stuff together, but then I will always have a general manager or someone who, wakes up and wants to focus on the nuts and bolts of that, initiative in that day.
As we're nearing the end of time here, what's one thing that you'd want to leave with the audience as they're, thinking about how to think about their business? They're coming into more profitability, they're coming into more growth. What's something that's been, impactful, meaningful for you that you would say, here's a good nugget for you guys to dive into?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing for me is two things. One is, and I mentioned both of them, but understand your values, because that is, you want to do things in line with them, not around them. So if you're trying to figure out what to do, that often will really help you decide, right? If one of your values is to always push the envelope, then you might be on that reinvestment path and not the, take the distribution path. I think the second thing, and Stephen Covey said this once, but as I said before, start with the end in mind. Like, what does good look like in 5 or 10 years? Because I think, to me, goal setting is a whole process of knocking over little dominoes towards a big domino. So, thinking about if you want to be working in 5 or 10 years, or you want to be the CEO of that business, you want to be doing everything every day. That's very different than if you said, I want to be out of this business and it's sold in 5 years. It would require a totally different strategy and execution book. So again, I think the values often help you figure out what is the right endpoint, because you don't want an endpoint that's misaligned with their values. I've seen many people spend a lot of work and energy to climb a mountain, and they're like, at the top, they're like, crap, I climbed the wrong mountain. Right. So I find values and clear goals, and then it's easy to work back into those. Like, here's what I should be doing if this is where I want to be.
That's great. And definitely done that on hikes, right? Where you get up to the top and you're like, oh crap, I want to be over there. I'm just in the wrong spot. But for the listeners who want to connect back with you, Bob, what's the best place? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, books, courses, podcasts, everything is at Robert Glazer, GLAZER.com.
Excellent. Appreciate the time and look forward to connecting and staying in touch.
Thanks so much for having me.